It was a city council recount, and half of the precincts couldn't be recounted. We had an entire community in there hoping to see the numbers and make sure it was right. The candidate was distraught when she filed to have all of the precincts recounted, and half of them couldn't be recounted. We've got to figure out how to get it right.
Yeah, I think just for me, that's always something I found very odd is,
Right.
For many years we have elections. And then I think just for me, that's always something I found very odd is,
Right.
for many years we have elections.
Are unsealed
I think just for me, that's always something I found. Was that widespread in Wayne County this time? Or was it limited to Livonia or what?
Again, if I had a written executive summary that showed me every precinct for the entire county, I could have prepared and highlighted and went, these 15 communities outside of Detroit all had problems. I don't have that information. I still don't have that report.
Wow. Now what is being, in Wayne County, which is where you can speak to, do you know, why does this sort of thing happen election after election? And maybe it happens elsewhere, but you're the Wayne County canvasser, so I just want to understand, as a canvasser, what do you say to the elections people when they tell you this year again, the ballot boxes are unsealed, the ballots don't add up? What do you say to them? Because I can't figure it out. Why is it always that way? What do you say to them to improve that? Please, sir. Please, sir. All right. So my question, though, is on Wayne County and the city of Detroit. Do you hear from them to say what are they going to do to stop this from happening in the future, so we can recount these precincts? And we're there is a trail.
We made that request after the primary.
And what happened?
I have not seen a report from the investigation. I saw lots of press releases from Secretary Benson saying that she was going to help with staff, and it did look like there was plenty of staff around TCF Center, so that appeared to be an improvement. I asked for a meeting with Clerk Winfrey prior to the election to try to understand the process a little bit better, to see what kind of improvements were being made. I did not receive a meeting with her before the election.
So would you say that in these election officials in Wayne County are not following the laws there?
I can't say that. I
Okay.
don't know that to be true.
But they're not communicating well. Would that be right to say they're not communicating what they're doing to why these problems are still happening with you as a canvasser?
I have no authority over that position. The clerk is not required to communicate with me.
Yeah, that seems like a problem. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Sure. Thank you for sharing that. I didn't know the answer to that. We'll go now to Representative Riley.
Thank you. When it comes to the precincts that don't balance, is there a quantity that we know? Is that public knowledge?
that don't balance that don't balance unexplained.
No, the
Because being out of balance, if it's explained, is okay, it's recountable.
Okay, but do we know the quantity, when something is not balanced, do we know the quantity of votes?
I believe, I asked for a cumulative total, because you have some that are higher and some that are lower. And the verbal number that was given to me during the canvassers meeting, I believe was around 400. But again, if I had a written executive summary that showed me every precinct that was plus or minus, there would be a total at that bottom of the page, and we could look at it real easy.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Representative C.A. Johnson.
Good afternoon, and thank you for being here, and thank you for what you do, and thank you for your vote.
Please, let's let her ask questions.
Mr. Chair, when we get a chance, I'd like to have this kind of even because we have a Detroiter.
Representative, I think you made that point earlier, and as I said, we're going to have more hearings, but what is your question?
No, I would like to have her address this body.
Okay,
She is a
we're going
Detroiter.
to move on, Representative, if you don't have a question. I'll go now to Representative Johnson, Steve Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So you talked about getting a number of revised poll books. Is that could you explain what that is? Because I'm not an elections guy.
Sure.
Explain that to me. Thank you.
Okay, in your poll book, there is a section that's the statement of voters. So for the absentees, it will show all the absentee ballots that were issued, requested, issued, and received. And you can see the dates in there for every person, and there's a total at the bottom. So on election, I believe it was Sunday that the poll books were printed. So all of the ballots that were received by Sunday when they were printed are in this list. There's a supplemental list for any ballots received after that. Okay, because you've got ballots coming in on election day while they're being processed. You add those two together once the polls are closed and you've got your total number of ballots received on election day. You add those two numbers together and that should be the total of ballots that you have sitting here. If they don't match, your phone call is to the clerk and say, why don't they match? Do you have envelopes that sitting on your desk that didn't get scanned? There is a method of going through the entire pile of envelopes to make sure every single one of them is scanned, and it does take some time. But in order to be able to make the mathematical corrections, how do you know, is my list of voters right, or is my number of ballots right? So you try to get, if there's any updates that need to be made to that list of voters, you try to make sure you've got that correct number to start from. Does that help?
That does help. Now, is it possible for someone to, let's say we're doing an investigation audit, can we see the original poll book as well as the revised version, or is only the revised version out
My
there?
understanding is that staff retains the original list and the revised list.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Representative LeGrand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So help me understand this because I've been involved in recounts in my county, and we have exactly, this issue is pretty much universal. Like it's a question of ratios change, but like nobody has 100% balanced precincts. And we heard testimony in the committee about that previously. My understanding was that you could recount if your tabulated number equals the number of paper ballots you have. Not that it has to equal the poll book. Am I wrong on that? And if that's true, then I think you can recount a whole lot more than the 71. You're saying 70% of them roughly can't be recounted?
Yeah,
I don't think that's right.
my understanding is that the votes, the people cast must match the votes cast. And then once you open it up, you count the paper ballots, and the paper ballots have to match the ballots cast.
Correct, but then that makes that recountable. In other words, if there's a tension with the poll book at that point, it doesn't make that an unrecountable precinct.
But in order to open the seal, my understanding is that they have to match.
Okay, that's not my understanding, but there's no point in us debating since neither one of us, we'd have to appeal to a higher authority on that one. But that's not my understanding for what it's worth, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative. All right, that's what the questions we have. So, thank you for coming today. Oh no, Representative LaFave. Sorry, I'm keeping. We've had so many people testify. I have so many tallies, so I missed that one. So, Representative LaFave, thanks for waiting. Please, when you're ready, ask your question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We talk about big boxes. These big metal boxes that have the stamp of approval or not by the Board of Canvassers. What are these boxes? What are they for? How big are they? This is multiple questions, I'm sorry. Tell me about the boxes, how big they are, how many ballots there are, potentially in each one of them and what they're for?
Okay. So the boxes are about this tall, about this wide. There was a batch of 50 new boxes purchased by the city of Detroit from Election Source, and roughly 30 of those boxes were defective. They're metal, and there's two sides that meet along the back, and the welds were not done properly, so there's a gap along the back seam. We rejected about 30 of those. Sometime before the November election, they did bring us some repaired containers, and we went through them and then took the red do not use tags off and put certified labels on those. But if I remember correctly, there were only 24, and I could be off by 1 or 2, 24 that came back repaired. As to how many ballots were in those containers, I would have to ask staff. I would maybe look online. I have the precinct number or the absentee counting board numbers, but I don't have the associated ballot counts with those counting boards. Does that answer all of your question?
Well, I only get one, so I would just like to say, I mean, if you buy 50 boxes and 30 of them are defective, let's never buy from that company again.
All right, thank you, Monica. That's the last question for you. We appreciate you coming to testify. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, with that, Mr. Giuliani, we'll let you make your, any closing remarks you have. And it is an hour over what I said it was going to be. Sorry about that, everybody. But we wanted to hear these people. I know that many feel that these people haven't been heard. And so we wanted to provide an opportunity for people to bring forward their stories and be heard. And we've tried to do that today, as did the Senate, I think, yesterday very well, the Senate Oversight Committee. But we wanted to offer you an opportunity to speak, and then I will let each member ask you a question. All right? So go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, this represents the affidavits of the witnesses that we didn't have the time to call.
I make sure that button's pushed. Thanks. Go
This
ahead.
represents the affidavits of the people that we didn't get a chance to call. There are hundreds of them, and they specifically allege similar acts of fraud, very similar to the witnesses that you heard. I find it puzzling that there seems to be such confusion about it. Maybe because of my background as a prosecutor, it's pretty obvious to me what happened here. The Democratic leader in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, or in Philadelphia, or in Detroit, or in Las Vegas, or in Phoenix, or in Milwaukee, or in Minneapolis, or in Atlanta, didn't wake up on election morning when all those mail ballots were going to come in and decide we're going to shut out all the Republican poll watchers, or as many as we can. I mean, we've been counting absentee ballots forever. I did it myself when I was a young lawyer. Republican sits on one side, Democrat sits on the other side. We don't have any problem with it. This was uniform shutting out of as many Republicans as possible. In Pennsylvania, 890,000 ballots were cast secretly, with no Republican getting a chance to take a look at the ballot. And in Pennsylvania, there are 600,000 more votes counted, mail votes counted, than mail ballots they can find. This is a swindle. It's a con job. It's a theft of an election. And it was carried out by the same method in the city of Detroit. And with all due respect to Detroit, several analyses of corrupt cities, my city, New York, comes ahead of Detroit. So I'm not saying this with any pride, but it happens to be one of the most corrupt cities in the United States. On any measure, I just checked online here, it comes in 4th, 5th, 3rd, 7th, 8th. Several times New York comes in ahead. So I wonder why the confusion about what happened. They stole the election. Not the first one they stole, not the last one they're going to steal unless you do something about it. But you do something real. not, let's see how we're going to fix it. You've been fixing it for years, and it hasn't gotten fixed. They've been stealing elections for years, and this time they got a chance to steal it really big because of the ridiculous mail ballot that was created. Back in 1960, the mayor of Chicago, the most corrupt city in America, by the way, just in case, on all the lists, by far, we can all feel better. Chicago's the most corrupt. He helped to steal the 1960 election by holding back the ballots in Chicago so the Republican ballots would come in, and then along with a gentleman named Sam Giancana, they got the ballots they needed to elect their candidate. Last year, 2 years ago in Florida, the same thing happened in Palm Beach and Broward County. It was a 2-point election, Senate, governor. Palm Beach County took 2.5 weeks to report. And finally it ended when they caught a truck like the one coming from Bayport, New York to Philadelphia. They caught a truck in Jacksonville headed to Palm Beach with 100,000 ballots that pretended to be Palm Beach ballots, but they were done up in Jacksonville. And then they had to end the election, and they prosecuted the people in Palm Beach. And remember, this year, we had no problem in Florida. I mean, you were counting for an eternity. Florida was over with that night because the governor had the courage to straighten it out. He had the courage to prosecute the people who committed the fraud. You don't end fraud by prospective measures to deal with fraud. You know how you end fraud? You put criminals in jail. That's how you end fraud. You have the courage to say that certification that was done by your state is a complete phony. It's a false statement made to the United States government. Those are prosecutable, by the way. That's not the vote by any means in Michigan. That's not the vote in Michigan. I don't know what the vote in Michigan is, but it's at least 300,000 or 400,000 votes off from what the real vote in Michigan is. And you heard the anger and the upset of your citizens. They seem to have more passion about it than you do. They figured out what happens because they live on the street. They know what happens in Detroit. Don't scratch your head about what happens in Detroit. They steal elections in Detroit.
Representative, you'll have an
And
opportunity.
they steal elections in New York, and they steal elections in Boston, and they steal elections in Philadelphia. And the Democrats were smart enough to pick 10 corrupt cities to play their game out. 10 cities in which they could get away with it. 10 cities in which they could go into court and find a hack judge that will decide anything they want. So, I mean, we can live in this strange world all we want, but we're getting at the point where our freedoms are beginning to be eroded. Our right of free speech has been eroded substantially by the censorship imposed by big tech, big media, big corporations, and the Democrat Party. Our right of freedom of religion, with the ridiculous dictatorial way in which the COVID regulations are imposed on us, like they like to be dictators, these Democrat governors, they're taking away our right of the freedom of religion. Those are basically the two reasons we founded this country. Oh, by the way, there was a third, the right to freely and honestly elect our government, and they're taking that away from us too. It should not go without notice. And you should spend time taking a look at Pennsylvania, look at Philadelphia, look at Pittsburgh, look at how eerily similar it is to what these people testified to. Read the rest of these and see that there are hundreds of people that back them up. That election center in Detroit was a disgrace. You should be ashamed of it as citizens of Michigan. I would be ashamed of it if it was in New York, and it could easily be in New York. And I would do everything in my power to make sure it never happened again. And I would never certify an election or have my name associated with anything that was false. Now, it is your responsibility to do that. Not the governor, not the Secretary of State. You were given that responsibility by our founding fathers. They decided who would be the final arbiter, who should overlook a presidential election. And in Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2, the power is given to you. In the McPherson case in 1892, the United States Supreme Court made clear that you can take that power back any time you want to. Anytime. You can take it back tonight. You can take it back the day before the electors go down to Washington. You can take it back any time you want. And in case you think it's old law, it was reiterated in Bush v. Gore. You have the right to take it back. You are the final arbiter of how honest or not your election is in your state. And it's your responsibility to stand up to that. And all I can tell you is, we let them get away with this. I don't know what happens after this. This was a concerted plan to fix this election. There's no way that Donald Trump was ahead by 800,000 votes going to bed at night, that he was ahead here by 300,000 votes, that he was ahead in Wisconsin by 400,000 votes, that he was ahead in every state, that over a 4 or 5 day period with this ridiculously corrupt system of counting, they turned around with ballots coming in the back door, ballots being driven down from New York. There's no way that this wasn't stolen. And what it takes is courage. Courage. Not to be afraid of what's happened to these poor people. They've got guts to stand up to what the Democrats do to them. And it's not just the wild and crazy left-wing Democrats who do it. They do it as a way of bullying us. You can see their behavior in this hearing. I can see the difference in behavior between two sides. Maybe sometimes we're too nice. Maybe sometimes we're too decent. Or maybe we shouldn't change. But one thing we should have is we have the ability to defend ourselves and not let our people get kicked around the way those Republicans were kicked around. They wouldn't let it happen, and we shouldn't let it happen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With that, and I ask the crowd, let's be respectful. I think one thing I've made, sir, please, sir, you're out of line. Please, we're having a legislative hearing here, so. I've said all members of this committee, if they wish, can ask a question. I hope we're respectful about that. So with that, I'll allow Representative LeGrand.
So, Mr. Giuliani, I really just have one question for you. We heard testimony tonight that you got an affidavit from one of these witnesses on November 8th, witness who talked about tens of thousands of ballots being riffed through a machine. We had another witness who talked about ballots being double counted, who said that her affidavit dates back to November 3rd. You opened your statement, you made, in your opening statement, you referenced 700,000 fraudulent ballots in Detroit, which is problematic given that there were only 250,000 counted. My question is, given that we have paper ballots in Michigan, why on earth did you not ask for a recount?
Well, there'd be no reason to ask for a recount, because you just recount the same fraudulent ballots. Once you have separated the envelope from the absentee ballot or mail-in ballot, you are forever unable to audit them. That's the reason why it is so critical that they be inspected. That's the reason why from time immemorial that's been done and honored by both political parties, and honored in the breach by your political party this time nationwide. 71%. There is no way, when they recounted in Atlanta, they just recounted all of the same fraudulent ballots. There's no way to trace those ballots, and that's why the inspection is so critical. And that's why, please don't, I don't need help. Please, I don't need help.
Let's allow the conversation. Let's stop yelling in the crowd.
And the reality is, if your political party had not bullied, pushed people around, intimidated people, and stopped them from doing their job as inspectors, this would not have happened.
Thank you. Representative Camilleri.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Giuliani, This committee heard testimony from a bipartisan group of county clerks in Michigan. One was a Democrat and two were Republicans. They testified that they found no evidence whatsoever of widespread irregularities in this election, and they lauded the municipal clerks and their teams who run elections in Michigan for their tireless effort and commitment to free, fair, and safe elections. Your team has now lost 39 court cases in the aftermath of the election, with judges ruling that there is inadequate evidence to support the sweeping claims that you are making and repeating here tonight, and the unprecedented relief that you are seeking. Yesterday, we learned that U.S. Attorney General William Barr has similarly found no evidence whatsoever of widespread irregularities that are worth investigating. If our local clerks, state and federal judges across the country, and the highest-ranking law enforcement official in the United States cannot find any substance to or any merit in any of your arguments, why should we? Why should we sit here in the show that you are partaking in and taking around the country if no one has found any evidence whatsoever of any of your wrongdoing? And why should we not believe the reported attempts of you to try to seek a pardon from the president? What was the last part?
That last part is not.
You're attempting to seek a pardon, so why is this not part of that?
I will ask that he be disciplined for that. First of all, hold on. First of all, what he said is untrue. Second, that is a defamation of my professional character. Do you allow that? Do you allow that to happen in your legislature?
As I said,
reported.
As I said, Representative, let's keep it limited to the germane issue here. So,
Just for the
Giuliani,
record,
let me ask
for the record,
question.
we haven't lost 39 cases. We've only brought 3. So you're wrong about that. Second, the reason why people are reaching those conclusions is because, like you, they don't have the discipline, maybe the intelligence, I don't know, to read through this, and to read 20 more like it. You can't tell me there's no evidence when I have a couple of thousand affidavits from people. You can't tell me that your credibility is better than the credibility of those people. They swore under oath. You didn't. And you seem very, very free to lie.
Mr. Giuliani, I'm just hoping to get an answer to the other questions about Mr. Barr and others who have disproven the law.
I gave you the answer.
Point of order.
The answer that I gave you is they didn't bother to interview a single witness. Just like you, they don't want to know the truth. Well, you probably know the truth. I'm worried about their not wanting to know the truth.
Thank you. Representative C.A. Johnson.
Well, I want to take the time to thank everybody and to thank you, Mr. Giuliani. And I will take the time to just give some quotes that some of my constituents made today. Our elected officials should be condemning.
Question, Representative?
Sir.
I'm asking you, what is your
No,
question?
I don't have a question. I would like
If
to...
you don't have a question, then we're going to move on, Representative.
No, that is not fair, sir.
Representative Riley,
Our
you can
elected
stop.
officials should be condemning, not...
I'm sorry, you're out of order, Representative. You're out of order. You're out of order. You don't have a question, you're out of order. Representative, you're out of order. You're out of order, Representative. You're out of order, ma'am. You're out of order, Representative. Representative Riley.
Thank you. Mr. Giuliani. So I just wanted to make sure that you're aware that there was real concern before this election by many individuals that there was going to be some crimes committed. And I think one of the ways that we saw that is when we realized that the training that was put on really revealed that it was going to be intentional to mislead some of the poll workers, etc., on what to do in situations that were coming up. So prior to the election, when we saw the training, there was some individuals that made it public that they had gone to some of the trainings and reported back, actually had evidence through recording the trainings, and said, these people are going to, this is not right. And so it was not until that came out that in a lawsuit, or a suit came out that said basically, that was taken to the Court of Claims, where they had to rule on this to say, you have to allow people to come up and do your job and get within 6 feet to do your job as a poll challenger. It wasn't until that that court case that happened. I also submitted an investigation, asked for an investigation from the Secretary of State prior to the election on this very thing. So I think there were some crimes committed when it comes to impeding what a challenger's role is. I believe it's a felony in the state to do that. And we have a responsibility, I believe, to do that. So I just want to make sure you're aware that we saw this coming and there was an effort to head this off.
Well, I appreciate that. Only thing I would say is I believe it's much worse than you realized it was going to be, and it is not confined by any means to Michigan. I mean, this is what you are describing, cutting off Republican inspectors, happened in 10 cities, all Democrat-controlled cities, all cities with a history of corruption, and in numbers that are not insignificant, in numbers like the hundreds of thousands. Enough to change the election.
All right, and I guess Representative Steve Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Giuliani, for being here today. The purpose of this committee is to search for truth. Whether you like it or not, the goal here is truth. What really happened? In that search for truth are things maybe we are happy with, maybe things we are happy with. It's led me to a couple understandings here that are going to probably make people on both sides angry. Number one, starting with Dominion. People that are essentially running our election, refusing to come before this committee and explain themselves. Amen. They are essentially a government contractor. We pay them, I assume, millions of dollars, and yet they will not come before this committee to answer tough questions. Amen. I think at the very least, their contract should be pulled going forward. However, let me continue. We could sit here and we could talk all day long about Dominion, about whether it's accurate, whether there's fraud, whether they're cheating, whether there's foreign influence. And your word is as good as mine. The only way we can actually know for sure whether Dominion actually changed the results of the election is through a hand recount. Now, I understand a hand recount would not... I understand that
let Representative Johnson speak, please.
Would not find dead people voting, would not find maybe illegal people voting, but a hand recount would determine if 20 votes went in for someone and the machine said 25 votes came out. A hand recount would identify that. And yet 48 hours, you have 48 hours after the vote certification to request the recount, and we never got that. So instead, what we hear is a lot of talk, a lot of thoughts, a lot of allegations, but we had one opportunity to actually do this, and the Trump campaign did not make that request. That's number one. Moving to Detroit, which is where a lot of this has been centered, and rightfully so. What we saw at the TCF Center was absolutely unacceptable. When you see where they are purposely violating a court order regarding the 6-foot rule, a purposeful violation. This isn't some old court order. This was right before the election. They knew darn well about that court order, and they purposely violated that. Chain of custody issues, absolutely huge. They have boxes that are open with ballots. Shocking. It's a box. You can't find a box that actually does its job. And then when you see, and there's video proof of this, not only just the testimony today, but you can see it online where when Republicans were being kicked out, they were being cheered. People were cheering when Republicans were being kicked out. And Republicans were not being let in to fill those spots. When you see the number of out-of-balance precincts, out-of-balance counting boards, not just this election, but previous elections as well in the city of Detroit, the citizens of Detroit deserve better. I quite frankly believe their city clerk should resign based off of their...
Representative,
I'm going to get my question right here.
All right.
However, looking at the votes in Detroit, the votes that are reported, 2016, Hillary Clinton received 234,871 votes. Biden this year, in a high record turnout year, 233,908. That means Biden received 1,000 less votes than Hillary Clinton, one of the most despised candidates of all time. Trump, 2016, 7,682 votes. 2020, 12,654, a 5,000 vote increase. So, to Mr. Giuliani, my question to you is, looking at all of the issues with Detroit, and there are a lot of them, how can we still justify that there was that mass cheating when still Trump's numbers increased by a net 5% versus years before? If someone were cheating, would those numbers not go the exact opposite direction?
No. He might have increased by 10% if it were a legitimate vote. I mean, he was ahead here. He was ahead here by 300,000 votes, which was a massive surprise. Also, let me go back to why we didn't ask for a recount. Doing a recount of the machines is not going to give us anything but the same false result. What we need is a forensic examination of the machines. Number two, this election was, I don't know how much the machines are going to yield anyway. This election was stolen by mail-in ballots. Those are the ballots that were stuck in the machine 8 times, 9 times, 10 times. Look at the numbers. I mean, Biden, I'm guessing now, I've forgotten the numbers here, but Biden got like 80% of the mail-in ballot vote, and Trump got 75% of the election day vote. So we're not going to quarrel with the election day vote. The election day vote is not what stole the election from us. It's the mail ballots, the ones that they wouldn't allow us to inspect. I mean, do you really think, representatives, that they shut us out from inspecting the ballots because they were handling the ballots honestly? I mean, do you really think they en masse pushed us out, put us in corrals, pushed us away, went to court to fight whether or not we can be close to the ballots? You think they did that because they were doing a very careful, honest vote? I doubt it.
It's been very clear that I think there's some major issues there. But when you talk about the...
Yeah, but those major issues, when you look at the numbers, the major issues, when you look at the numbers, are astounding. Hundreds of thousands of votes were counted there. And I have no idea what a recanvassing of the machines would do for us. A forensic examination of the machines might do something. And in fact, we would like to have the opportunity to look at the rest of those machines in Michigan. I don't know why you're not looking at them. I mean, whatever you want to say about Dominion, read its history. Read the history of Dominion, and you will get an idea of what a crooked company it is, which maybe is the reason they don't want to show up here. They really don't want to tell you that the two of them that own it are Venezuelans, and they brought the two Smartmatic owners, they brought the two guys who are Canadians down to meet Chavez just 2 years ago. They don't want to tell you that. They don't want to tell you about the 5 elections in South America that they fixed. Just read it. Just look it up. Now, I don't know if that really made the difference in the election. I'm not sure. But I do know their plan was to steal this election based on this massive mail-in vote, which, by the way, we have for 20 years been warned against. For 20 years, people wiser than us have said, Justice Souter, President Carter, Secretary Baker, Columbia University. You read reports on what is the most dangerous form of voting. What form of voting can be manipulated, and where can you carry out fraud the most? And it's mail-in ballots. And we were stupid enough to go to mail-in ballots.
All right, Representative Lefebvre.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Attorney Jen Ellis, Mayor Giuliani, all of the witnesses, committee members, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate everybody coming today. I think this was helpful. I've personally got a lot of things that are troubling as well. But my only question for this last witness is what specifically do you want us to do? Is it you're coming here today and saying that based on all of these concerning issues, you want the State House and Senate of Michigan to hand the president the 16 electoral votes for Michigan? Is that what your ask is today?
No, I didn't ask that. I asked that you take back your power under under Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2 of the Constitution, that you take back that power and that you spend the time, not just to listen to, you shouldn't decide anything based on what I gave you. It's just a sample. It's just a sample of things. There's a plethora of evidence that you can go through that will convince you that this election was stolen. I would ask you to go through that. Don't let it just get taken from us, and then we'll find out a year from now what the real plot was. And take a look, to some extent, at what happened in other states. Because the fact that it's so similar in other states gives you a sense that what we're dealing with here was a plan. Not just an accidental, oh gosh, Detroit stole an election, or Chicago stole an election, or New York stole an election. But I think you have a responsibility to go into session, take back look, the people who certified your election, what are they worth?
Can't trust them.
Yeah, I wouldn't have put my name on that piece of paper. Not worth anything. The piece of paper's a lie. We all know it's a lie. We know that figures there aren't correct. They're such wonderful public servants, they put their name on a lie. Why don't you spend the time to find out what the right numbers should be?
I guess, Mr. Mayor, my problem is we have these certifiers who I think, and maybe I'm wrong, but at least in one particular example, they didn't feel confident. They certified the vote. And now you're asked, the legislature is to take, and if I'm wrong again, tell me, to take evidence that, and put my name to it, and say that this is definitely what happened. This is somebody won. I assume it wasn't Kanye West. I don't know. But to figure it out, and you want us to make the decision, and then put our stamp of approval on it.
No, I don't want you to do it. The Constitution of the United States says you should do it. All right, I don't want you to do it. Please, read the Federalist Papers. It was given to you as the ultimate plenary power because you're the body closest to the people, and therefore the body that they believe could be most trusted to protect the people.
Thank you, Mr.
Not the bureaucrats who made that decision.
Thank you.
Representative C.A. Johnson, are you willing to make a question?
Quick question.
Sure.
Very quick. Mr. Giuliani. Hi again.
Hello?
Do you think that both you and the president are honest men?
Do I really have to answer that question?
Yes.
Representative C.A. Johnson, Representative,
Answer it.
Representative, do you have a point of order?
I'm asking the question.
Representative,
I'm
we're not
asking the question.
You
Do
need a
you
question related
consider
to the
yourself
election.
Mr.
Representative, you're out of order. Out of order. Representative, you're out of order. Representative, if you want to ask a question about the election, you can ask the question. But that is not about the election. So, do you have a question about the election, Representative?
I can't because this is a show. No, I just can't.
Representative, do you have a, hold on, Representative.
You really believe?
Representative, do you have a question about the election?
Yes.
All right, then I'll turn your mic on. Ask the question about the
Mr.
election.
Giuliani. Oh, did you turn it off?
If you have a question
Giuliani.
about the election, ask it.
I can hear you.
Mr. Giuliani. Do you believe that the citizens of Detroit, those who have voted, feel like what you're doing today is disenfranchising or attempting to disenfranchise the citizens of Detroit?
Just the opposite. I would say that trying to separate the honest from the dishonest vote is saving the franchise because every dishonest vote deprives an honest person of their vote.
I agree. I absolutely agree.
Let's let him, Representative, let's let him answer the question.
Yeah, he just did.
Okay, then.
Yeah,
I think-
he just did.
Oh,
And
then-
so I agree with you. Dishonesty is dishonesty. Right? Right.
Thank you, Representative. All right, Mr. Giuliani, I think that's the questions for you. I know
Jenna Ellis asked to say something. I'm not sure what, but what is it you wanted to say? You have some kind of closing statement?
Thank you. And I appreciate all of the members of the panel. And typically what I've done before 2 other states is to explain the Constitution and to explain your duty. However, in this particular legislature, it's very apparent that the circus has only been from one side. The witnesses that have appeared before you today have done so as honest, sincere, and forthright citizens, bringing concerns to you. And when you are saying that there are concerns, but only looking forward, you're not doing your constitutionally obligated and mandated duty. And what we're here to do today is to present to you the evidence that we've been able to do in the last 4 hours. Mayor Giuliani is very correct that this is only a sample. But no honest person can hear these citizens of your own state today look at what happened in Wayne County with the bullying of the 2 GOP Board of Canvassers when they didn't want to certify the election, and can let this proceed. What the Constitution obligates you to do is to take back your plenary power, because the certification was false, clearly. And you can do that, and you should do that, because you have an obligation as state legislators. Now, normally, when I've testified in front of state legislators, it's about policy and it's about legislation. This isn't about policy. It's not about politics. It's not about Democrat versus Republican. It's not even about President Trump versus Joe Biden. This is about election integrity. This is about making sure that the people of the state of Michigan are not disenfranchised based on fraud and corruption. That's the reason that we are here. And I asked you at the very beginning to put aside your party and your preconceptions to listen honestly to the people who've appeared before you. Now, I've been a part of many court trials, and you as the fact finders, of course, can determine and assess their credibility. They have sworn affidavits that they all indicated to you they swore under penalty of perjury. That's actually a very big deal for a citizen to come forward and do that. They're doing this because they're patriots and because America cannot function and exist without free and fair elections. Our founders understood that, and that's why they obligated you to be the last guardians of that process. What we're asking you to do is not something that is unheard of. It's not even something that hasn't been contemplated by our United States Supreme Court, which held in that 1892 case that was then cited favorably in Bush v. Gore, that this is your plenary, meaning absolute,